Hold on. Give us 1 second. That is not the live stream. Sorry.
My bad.
It's all good.
I've been running since the day I was born, racing the sun before I found that sure no place to call my own. Mama told me, son, you better slow down, but if I had wings, I'd be gone by now. I'm sinking like a stone. So glad morning, I'm gonna go get myself alone. Move on up that road. All this brick and this wood, it ain't done me no good. It ain't home, sweet home. Well, I've been dreaming about what's left to come. I left a lot of things unsaid, undone, and they won't leave me alone. Mama told me, son, don't you drag your feet. I never marched to the old man beat, Lord knows I've got my own. Some glad morning, I'm gonna go get myself alone. Move on up that road. All this brick and this wood, it ain't done me no good. It ain't no sweet home. It ain't no sweet home. It ain't no sweet home.
Thank you, Bradford. That was Bradford Loomis. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone joining us today. My name is Heidi Moore. I'm Executive Director for Missourians to Abolish the Death Penalty. We have with us Bradford Loomis, who is a musician who has met Lance. He will talk about that experience and how his views have changed. We have Abe Bonowitz, the Director and co-founder of Death Penalty Action. Abe is active nationally, and he can talk some about the national increase in executions we have and the other executions scheduled around the same time as Lance's, including yesterday, Governor DeSantis scheduled one 6 p.m. East Coast time in Florida on the same day that Lance is scheduled. We have Jeff Kohler. Jeff is a volunteer with Kairos Prison Ministry. He is a friend of Lance's for about 10 years, and he's also going to talk about who Lance is today. Allie Sullivan, although her picture is showing as me, Allie is with Death Penalty Action and is providing technical support and guidance with us today. We have Jeff Stack, the coordinator for Mid-Missouri Fellowship of Reconciliation, to talk about the events that they are planning and also to talk about the judicial loophole aspect of Lance's case. And last but not least, we have Gigi Peterkin. I may have got your last name wrong, Gigi. I always just call you Gigi. She is with the PR firm who works with the legal team. With that, you all are here today because Lance Shockley has been scheduled for execution in Missouri on October 14th. Lance has a strong case of innocence, and he has always maintained that he is innocent in this case. But before we get into the aspects of the case, I want to open up with Jeff and Bradford to just converse with us about their experience of meeting Lance and knowing, in Jeff's case, knowing him as a friend, and just what brought you all to this point to be able to share with us the man Lance is today. Thank you.
So you want to go first, Bradford, or you want me to?
Why don't you go?
Okay. All right. So yeah, I've known Lance for about 10 years. It might be helpful just to spend a couple minutes talking about the Kairos program, and which is really how I got to know Lance. But Kairos is a non-denominational program that really is just there to show the unconditional love of Jesus Christ to everybody that's incarcerated. So I'm in charge of the Potosi Kairos. So Kairos is actually an international organization. So we go into prisons throughout the entire world. But I'm in charge of the program in Potosi Correctional Center. And basically we have weekends twice a year. So we'll go in on a Thursday in April and a Thursday in October. We'll spend 4 days there, about 12 to 14 hours a day for those days. And really, it's just to show again the unconditional love of Jesus. So we present our weaknesses. So a lot of our team members are um, alcoholics and former drug abusers and have gotten into various trouble throughout our lives, and we share that. So we sort of have, we hope, instant credibility with the guys in there. So we spend 4 days with them, really create a wonderful bond on behalf of Jesus. And then every Monday night after that, so every Monday night forever, hopefully, we will go back into the prison and basically have prayer groups. So we're there mostly to supervise on Monday nights, but we go in and and we we're the mechanism that allows the prison allows them to have these prayer groups. So that's kind of a little bit of a background on Kairos and what we do and how we all met Lance. But as Heidi said, I've known him for about 10 years, and just a couple of personal stories. So he is a really really special, charismatic, wonderful human being for everybody that's had the pleasure of meeting him. He looks you in the eye and he wants to know about you. So he never leads with who with who he is or what his agenda is. He always wants to know about everybody else first. And this carries over to everyone he talks to. It carries over to his daughters and his family. And that's so impressive to all of us that he does what really all of us should be doing as good humans and good Christians, which is to care as much or more about others as he would himself. So kind of a funny one. He's a really good athlete. So he he's never been beaten in pickleball. So they have pickleball courts in Potosi, and he's undefeated. So and when he's been a bodybuilder at various points in his life, so he really is an outstanding athlete, which I think gives him again sort of instant credibility in the prison, because they care a lot about that sort of thing at times, that how strong somebody is, or whether they're a good basketball player or whatever. So Lance actually, from the inside, kind of runs what they call the rec program, or at least he did until a few months ago. But he would kind of organize the various games within the prison while they're on their rec time. So basketball or pickleball or whatever it is. And so you could tell every interaction, when you observe people interacting with Lance, they just gravitate towards him. And he's just, again, just got a real special uh, characteristic there with being able to relate to people. One of the neatest things, I think, is that he does something called restorative justice, and part of that in the prison is that he actually has repaired shoes for many years. So people bring their sneakers to him that have tears in them, or the sole is separated, or whatever, and Lance repairs those shoes, and with a smile on his face, and he's gotten very good at it, and I can't help but think that's sort of symbolic of washing of feet, if you will. He's helping the feet of other residents of Potosi. At Kairos we call them residents. We don't call them prisoners or inmates, or those are all have negative connotations. So we call them all residents. And and again, throughout the years, Lance has told me about his daughters and how much his daughters love him. And up until recently, this is, I think, says a lot about Lance too. He never he never talks about his case or whether he's innocent or not. Of course, he has to now, and thank God all this is getting out finally. But he never led with that. I didn't know till a few months ago that he says he's innocent, and I believe him. I believe that he is innocent, but he never led with that. He never, that wasn't important for him in terms of his relationship with other people. And so I think that's pretty neat that he he didn't feel a need to lead and make that the number one discussion point, even though I think for most of us it would be tempting to do just that. But he never did, and that makes me think even more highly of him, just because it would be so difficult for anyone to do that. So I'm gonna pause there. I don't want to jeopardize the whole deal here. So either we can turn it over to Bradford, or if I don't know if we're going to do questions later or anything, but I'll pause there.
I should have gone first. That's great, Jeff. In my time knowing Lance, he's had a deeply profound effect on me. I'm somebody that grew up. I'm a sexual abuse survivor. So it's really easy when you've had something traumatic like that in your childhood to err on the side of crime and punishment. Make sure that prisoners get, make sure that people who have done terrible things get punished appropriately. And it's really easy to have that sense of uh, judgment kind of looming for you when you've been a victim. But getting a chance to go to Potosi Correctional Center and meet the men in the program and play for all of these inmates, and then having subsequent conversations both with Lance, but then also maybe more importantly, people who have been affected by Lance, was really profound for me, because I was able to see there's a human being there. And when I first met Lance, and for most of my interaction with him, I didn't even know what he had been incarcerated for. And so it wasn't until I went and saw his appeal hearing that I learned more about the specifics of his case. And that really kind of galvanized me towards trying to do what I could to get the word out about his case, and where I think the flaws are, and just the advocacy of the man behind the case. And being able to see how this individual who, has had his freedom taken away from him, really has very little control over his life, still pour so much into the people around him. And like Jeff said, he gives the first thing whenever we talk, the first thing he does is he asks me about me. And he wants to know how I'm doing. And he has all the reason in the world to advocate for every aspect of, like, what are we doing? How can we get the word out more? So many people would feel that pressure. And I'm sure deep down he does, but that's not what comes out. He is somebody who is always wearing that hat in all of my interactions with him, always wearing that hat of ministering to other people, of caring deeply for other people. And that to me has had a profound experience, a profound effect on my life. And so much so that I wrote a song about it. And so I've taken that out on the road and did a TED talk about it. Just trying to point to the ways that Lance has, I think, changed me for the better, and helped me to see the futility of the death penalty. So I'm pretty thankful for being able to have had the experience to get to meet him and get to know him a little bit. And I hope more people are able to interact with him, and get to know him as well, and we can get some movement towards some kind of a clemency.
Thank you, Bradford. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate your opening up. And Bradford, I'm also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And you're right. I mean, people tend to immediately go to the punishment side of things.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you highlighting that aspect. Um, Gigi, do you want to talk a little about where we are with the case right now? And
I'm happy to talk about where we are with the clemency campaign. I
thank you.
can't really talk about too much in terms of litigation. I can say that we are the case team is pursuing the possibility of DNA testing that is on our website of 16 total pieces of evidence. That would be 15 pieces not yet tested and one for a retest. And that is just something that we are hoping to have some information on very soon, especially with the clock ticking as it is. In terms of the clemency campaign, I am just very happy, Heidi, thank you for putting this together, and, for MADP, for Abe's organization, Jeff, for all the other organizations that are out there getting petition signatures. I know that you're all doing really well. We're gathering signatures on our site as well. Wherever you sign, I would say, please go sign the petition, urging the governor to ask for clemency. We're up to 1,500 signatures on our site, and we also have 500 newsletter subscribers. I would say if you wanted to learn from the case team directly updates, please consider, subscribing to our newsletter in addition to the other newsletters you may be subscribing to for the broader death penalty work. And then just to echo what Jeff and Bradford said, I've talked to Lance on the phone, and he's still that same guy. Even post death warrant, he still wants to know, how you are and how your family is. And of course, he's very interested in getting relief from this warrant and in gaining clemency, and very interested in that work. But he has not lost his humanity. In fact, I think his humanity has miraculously somehow grown inside of Potosi. And, when we look at the facts of his case and we look at the, more than 100 leads not followed and the around 60 other suspects not investigated, and we look at the lack of DNA testing, and we look at the flaws in the state timeline, and we look at the judicial loophole that got to the sentencing in the first place, it would be easy for somebody to become bitter and become angry, especially somebody who is facing death for a crime that, I believe Lance's innocence as well. I've seen too much of the facts in addition to speaking to him to think otherwise. So I marvel at his ability to maintain his humanity, to find his faith, and to want to share that with other people.
Thanks, Gigi. Gigi, I know you and I have kind of on death penalty actions, the forecast, we've talked together about some of the issues with the case. And if we can do that now, and if Jeff Stack or Abe or anyone else wants to jump in, please feel free to. I know that the timeline, you brought it up, and I had a cop ask me on the I Stand with Lane's website, which Allie has posted in the chat as well. That is the website Gigi's referring to, and that has the timeline, which they just released about 2 weeks ago to the public. It is very detailed. It is a very complicated timeline so that you can see how the state actually manipulated the witnesses to fit the timeline that fit the state's narrative, is how I believe it's best explained. And I had a cop ask me that Trooper Sergeant Graham was shot. He on his radio, he he clocked out on his radio at 4:03 p.m. Witnesses said they heard gunfire between 3:45 and 4:15. Lance has an alibi during that time period, which was never brought up in court. And I had a cop ask me, well, how do you know he clocked out from his own driveway? Well, it's in the appeal. It's in the state's case itself that Trooper Graham was in his own driveway when he clocked out at 4:03. The cop that asked me this was trying to make sure that Lance's alibi, wasn't a convenient alibi. And he said that cops often clock out from other locations from their car and maybe run errands. Have you had any interactions or discussions about the timeline more in depth and how the state has tried to make the witnesses fit inside those timelines? Can you explain that a little more?
I mean, I think when you look at, and yes, you're right. When you first go to that page, I would just say it does seem overwhelming. The legend is very clear, and you can even see the differences between, the state's case and the witnesses. There's even a witness discrepancy on that. So I think when you just take a look at that, if nothing else, it raises so much doubt. But there are actually quite a few witnesses who did place Lance several, miles, like 30 miles away. So in a place where really, I think he would have needed a time traveling machine to get to where they said he was. Well, actually, they actually placed him at the scene for several hours before, and we just know that he was not there. So, in terms of the pressures that were exerted on people, I will admit that I am not as familiar with the affidavits as I am in some other cases that I work on. We currently have 5 death penalty cases, and that we're here to talk about Lance, but I don't want to misspeak because I have so much data in my head right now. But we are making public all of the public facing information that we can share, bearing in mind the appeal that we have in court. There's nothing that we don't. The only reason we're not sharing something that, you could get through a FOIA request is that we want to make sure we don't harm his chances in terms of his DNA appeal, quite frankly. And that we're staying beyond by the book for that. But the pressure to change statements, I think, is or to rethink your statements, or to be 1,000% sure of your statements for whatever reason, is something that we find in this case as much as we've seen it in every other case I've worked on.
Right, thank you. And the state has contended that this is all circumstantial evidence. Like, they have even admitted that this is just a case filled with circumstantial evidence. On top of that, the motive that they gave, I know I speak about this every time I talk about it, but it's just so absurd that Lance killed the trooper to stop the investigation into another crime, which carried 7 to 10 years, roughly. And so I just continue to want to remind people that it's all circumstantial. There's no evidence linking Lance to this case. There's no DNA evidence. There's no forensic evidence. And as you said, Lance himself is pushing to have these 16 pieces. There's about 16 items found at the crime scene where supposedly Lance was for over 2 hours and waiting. And he is the one that has been pushing the legal team to try to get this evidence tested, although it's still in the Highway Patrol's custody.
Yeah, absolutely. He has been, the loudest voice for DNA testing on this, which, and to your point, I find the motive to be non-existent, to get death on a circumstantial case. And you also have to think then, there's a reason the jury deadlocked. There's a reason that they had a hard time getting to sentence to verdict, which they did. And I believe personally, this is a very personal statement, that the juror misconduct helped them get there. I'm not speaking for the legal team right now. I'm just divorcing myself from that and going to say, personally, I do believe that we can't overlook juror misconduct before we even got to the guilt phase. And the fact that they deadlocked on sentencing, I think, speaks to the lack of, they weren't comfortable sentencing this man to die based on the evidence that was in front of them. And that says a lot.
Yeah, good point. And with the judicial what Gigi's talking about is the jury foreman, one, his son is a cop. So if that doesn't, people from Missouri that's familiar with McCullough's cases that he did not recuse himself from, Bob McCullough, the former prosecutor of St. Louis County, the juror's foreman, his son was a cop. He had written a book about a DWI offense in which a person died and the vigilante justice that went along with it. Lance's underlining and so the jury, not only was he not, excused as a jury foreman, I mean, he was made the foreman as well. On top of that, then he brought the copies of the book in. The bailiff ended up with one ended up on the judge's desk, we've been told as well, right, Gigi?
Yeah, he gave one to the judge, he passed it out to the jurors, he handed it out to other court personnel, including the bailiff.
And he was not removed as the jury foreman until after the finding of guilt or innocence. At that point, he was removed as jury foreman, but the courts did not, from what I understand from from what I have read, the court did not interview then the other jurors to see his impact on their finding of guilt or innocent. That was kind of stayed. We'll come back to this later, they never came back to it. And then in Missouri, we have the judicial loophole. Jeff, are you ready to talk some about how the judicial loophole is in Missouri? Is it a good time for you to talk about that now?
Yeah, I'll be glad to chat for a little bit. I really appreciate learning more about Lance from Jeff and Bradford too. And Gigi, thanks for your summation. You too, Heidi. Yeah, in Missouri, we're one of just two states, along with Indiana, where when a jury deadlocks, it can't decide. And we're already talking about all these jurors who are hearing these death penalty cases. They have to be death qualified. Anybody who opposes the death penalty in principle can't sit on these juries. So even after that, when a jury cannot decide unanimously on a sentence of death, in other states is automatically life without the possibility of parole or some other consequence. But in Missouri, you have the judges, the way they've interpreted the law, and the law is really pretty fuzzy on how it's written, because it's missing a comma to suggest or death. Really, the courts have been allowed to go ahead and interpret the statute as allowing judges to step in if the jury deadlocks. And so, yeah, indeed, in Missouri, then the Marshall Project did a study, and in June they found that 18 people had been sentenced to death by judges in Missouri in capital cases, and there's Lance's is one of those. Where a jury, we're told, I mean, juries are kind of a bedrock for our democracy and for our court system. And to give the power back to a judge is pretty anti-democratic, with a small d. So in Missouri, yes, as I said, one of two states that has this judicial loophole that judges can step in. There have been some cases where jurors decided 11-1 for life, but that still didn't matter. A judge stepped in and imposed a death sentence nonetheless. So we have made efforts over the last several years to get bills moved into the legislature to try to advance that provision, to try to reform the bill, to go ahead and say, with the rest of the states, that if a jury can't decide on a consequence, then it should be life without the possibility of parole. That's plenty punishment enough. And that gives also the chance in cases like Lance's, if there's issues of possible wrongful conviction, where you can actually spare the man's life then and set him free eventually, hopefully. But yeah, in our state with the legislature, we had no luck for many years. And part of the reason had been, quite frankly, 3 years from 2021 to 2024, the judge who presided over Lance's case and decided to impose death, Judge David Evans in Carter County, yeah, he stepped in and imposed death when the jury couldn't decide. So he became a legislator had served as the chair of the Judiciary Committee for those 3 years, 2021 through 24. And he worked really behind the scenes to prevent any hearing on these bills, to try to close that loophole. He was very active in those efforts. We found, that other lawmakers were kind of cowed into not moving their bills forward into another committee. So we'll probably hear more about that in the coming weeks from the legal team, I think, but there'll be more work on that. But it's really curious. Judge Evans is also, or I'm sorry, Representative Evans, he did retire, believe it was in March. So he didn't run or not March of 2024. So he's not in the legislature now, but he also ended up, curiously enough, in another case where there's a strong case of wrongful conviction. Walter Barton, he was appointed as a special judge when there were 6 members of the Missouri Supreme Court considering Walter Barton, who, again, he was executed under Governor Parsons. Governor Parsons declined to intervene, but it was really curious. In 2007, then Judge Evans was able to work as an independent judge. Somehow he was in and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know exactly how these matters end up working out, but yeah, Evans was able to break the tie and deny a new trial for Walter Barton on various issues that he had. And so that led ultimately to his him receiving a death sentence, or receiving an execution date, and ultimately being executed. So Mr. Evans is a very interesting individual and person who deserves much more attention and scrutiny in this case and others.
Jeff, I appreciate that. I would also like to add, I was just with legislators on Wednesday. We have bipartisan support for the judicial loophole bill. It is regularly sponsored by Republicans and Democrats. We have Republican senators. Mary Elizabeth Coleman out of Jefferson County sponsors on the Senate side, and at the House level, we have Bishop Davidson, we have Jim Murphy. The House Speaker supports the bill, Dr. John Patterson. So we have bipartisan support on this judicial loophole bill, and we are hoping that we can get it. It went out of committee last year and actually made it to debate on the House floor. We will need help getting some senators, but that will be a call to action once the legislative session opens. But I wanted to bring it now because Jeff did such a great job of covering how that bill, and Abe, I don't know, not to put you on the spot, but Indiana's not currently, do they have someone scheduled to execute? Because they are the other state with this judicial loophole. Had they been kind of on pause or a hiatus for a minute on executions?
Which state did you mention?
Indiana, they're the other state with the judicial loophole.
If they fully intend to execute somebody the Thursday night, Friday morning prior to the date that Lance has, October 10th, which happens to be World Day Against the Death Penalty. So, I mean, the space that we're in right now in the world and in this country with regard to, anything judicial is ram it through, and, getting relief in the courts is going to be a challenge in any kind of case. And to Mark's question, which has been in the Q&A, there's, how is it he's asking basically, how do you get the courts to look at the inconsistencies in these cases? And that's part of the challenge, is getting them to even look at it. Because as soon as you file something, and by the way, I'm not an attorney, nor do I play one on TV, but once when they file when the defense files something, before it's ever looked at, the state is going to oppose that. And unless it's so blatant, and they do a good job of finessing it with the prosecution before they even file it, so that everybody understands this is coming and we're going to agree to it, you would think that they would want, because a prosecutor's job is to do justice, whatever justice is, which means hopefully getting the truth, that they would want any questions about evidence to be fully examined before they kill somebody. And that's the challenge. Is it's more about the win. It's more about don't embarrass us and show that we convicted the wrong person. We don't want to have any discussion about it. So even before you can have the merits of an argument heard in court, first you have to get permission to do so, and you have to get past that hurdle of a prosecutor saying, we don't even want that. That's a BS argument. We don't agree. And then the judge has to decide what's going to happen. And then depending on what court and what part of the process that you're in, whether or not they decide to look at a case often has to do with whether there's already been that particular process, that particular legal process. So one of the things that we're consistently seeing now is, despite whatever the new evidence is, whether it's evidence of innocence or evidence of intellectual disability or mental illness or racism in your jury, whatever it is, if you pass a certain point, they have what they call a procedural bar. And they basically say it's too late to bring it up. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just too late. You can't have that conversation. And we've seen people executed, even with evidence of innocence, regularly over the last few years. And that's just gonna, sadly, I think that's gonna continue. The other challenge that we have, of course, is once you get a court to rule on something, then the other side is gonna challenge that to the next court up. And that's also, unless it's in a court where it can't be challenged, and sometimes that's the case. But I'm not the expert on that. At the end of the day, though, the bottom line is it's very, very difficult to get something done, especially if there's already been a ruling on something. For example, if I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gigi or Heidi, but my understanding is that Lance has already been denied the ability to bring this DNA evidence for testing, right?
So, and Gigi may need to pop in as well. So in July, they were still waiting for even they had a motion to even have the hearing. That was denied. And that is what the appeal is for. They wouldn't even let him have a hearing. And the judge was a former prosecutor. They didn't know how he would go, but he did know that whichever way he ruled, what you just alluded to, Abe, is it would be appealed by either party. If he granted the hearing, the prosecutor was going to appeal it. And if he denied it, obviously Lance's legal team was going to appeal it, which they have. It has been sitting in appeals now for, I thought someone told me, over 30 days. I don't know exactly, but it is in appeals in Missouri just for a motion to have the hearing. So the courts are,
We're
I
close
do.
to the 30-day mark. We're just coming to that 30-day mark. Sorry.
Okay.
To interrupt.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you. I knew it was getting close to that. And thank you for that background information as well, Abe. As we were talking about the man that Lance is today, and as we've discussed some of the issues with the court case, and I don't know if Jeff knows this, Jeff K knows this, or but Gigi, you were telling me about Lance had, well, not just me, we were telling a broader audience, but how Lance had planned this Father's Day event. And I don't know if Jeff is aware of that or Gigi, but if one of you would speak about that and how the prison staff themselves delayed notifying him so he could enjoy this event.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. The day that the warrant came down, and I think this is something that, Heidi, if we have a few moments to then get to the broader issue of how life changes at Potosi for somebody once they get a warrant versus up to that time. So because getting the warrant would mean being removed from the house where he was and being, put into that isolation. The warrant, of course, came through in the morning, and Lance had planned a Father's Day event for the prison. And the warden held off, I believe it was the assistant warden, held off on notification until that event had passed, so that Lance could experience it as well, so that the event could move forward without this very heavy thing hanging over it. And they actually notified him at the end of the day. So really, and yes, it was for the entire prison. It wasn't just for his own house or just his own, somebody related to Kairos or in the restorative justice program. It was for Potosi. And I think that really says something about who Lance is as a person, that they wanted to give him that consideration, quite honestly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I'll speak. So at Potosi, for anyone that doesn't know, Missouri is unique in that we don't have a traditional death row like you see on the Green Mile or you see in other places. California has a huge building just warehousing men under a death sentence. And the one at Huntsville, Texas is famous as well. Missouri's men they're all held at Potosi. However, their housing unit is assigned based upon their conduct, based upon how they behave in the prison. So Lance was in the honor dorm. Vincent McFadden is also in the honor dorm. And that means that they have privileges and they can get food visits. They can have jobs. You heard Jeff speak about Lance he's in charge of planning the rec activities for the other guys at the prison and plays undefeated pickleball champion. That is not always the case at other prisons. And when I was on Louisiana's death row at Angola, it's like you see on TV. It's a wing, well, multiple wings, and the men are locked up 23 or 24 hours a day. There's one big TV on the wall. In Missouri, it's not that way. Therefore, as Gigi was talking about, when Lance got his death warrant read, he was immediately handcuffed, locked up. This is how it traditionally happens. Let me make that clear. I was not there. I don't know what exactly happened. And then they're put in isolation in one house, which is the housing unit where the men are housed that are the most disruptive in the prison. They're typically the ones that are less able to be managed. And as you work your way up to level 1, that is where you are constrained the most. You're restricted. Your toilets don't look the same. Your bed doesn't look the same. And there's a lot of noise in that housing unit. And so in Missouri, when someone's read their death warrant, they go from being in a case like Lance's of having the most freedom of any of the other men on honor status to getting locked up and having those privileges taken away immediately. And then it's been my understanding that once he gets moved to Bonne Terre, he will be in basically just a glass, like a window cell, stripped down to his boxers, lights on all the time, and has a guard watching him 24/7. That is how it's been described to me by Elise and others who have been doing the work in Missouri. So that's kind of in the pit of the stomach part, where in other states men get to keep having their job. Once they have their death warrant, their life continues mostly as normal as it could be, knowing that the date's been set. But in Missouri, they get locked up, they get isolated, their recreation, their job, all of those things. I don't know if he's still able to participate in religious services or not. But Gigi, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important to understand that. And I think it brings up several other questions. And one of the issues I think is that, Lance was a person that was relied on to de-escalate issues among fellow incarcerees, to de-escalate, as well as to uplift, to perform baptisms, to perform religious ceremonies, to speak at ceremonial events, like a Kairos graduation. I think Jeff could speak to that. And in losing all of those privileges, you lose that ability. Missouri really leans into the fact that the Department of Corrections has restorative justice on their website as something that they are really leaning into. You now remove him from counseling other people and helping them move to their own restorative justice. You take all of that away. And if we're really going to look at, both inside and outside of the death penalty, the ability for people to rehabilitate inside of that environment taking somebody like Lance outside of that, who has had such an impact, it's really, the ripple effect, I think, really becomes huge. And it's something that we don't always think about when we think about people who are living in Potosi and what that means once that happens.
Yeah, thank you, Gigi. Jeff, do you have anything you want to add to that by chance?
I do. So one of the things I do there also is I go to all the solitary confinement cells on Tuesday, and so I see one house, two house, and half a three house, and I cannot tell you um, how many of as I'm going from cell to cell, a lot of the guys' first question is, "How's Lance doing?" You know, and so these guys in solitary, you know, who have, you know, not only done something in most cases to get into the prison, but now have done something uh, with respect to their behavior that the prison views as needing isolation. And but these tough guys are always asking about Lance for, you know, every other cell that I go to. And again, that's just a testimony, a testament to the kind of guy that he is. And just one last thought on Kairos. We have a server team. So as I said, we go in there twice a year, and we have an inside server team. So Lance had wanted to be on one of these server teams and did such a good job. He was also asked to do the closing talk at one of our weekends, um, and just probably did the most powerful talk anybody's ever given or heard. And just a beautiful thing, talking about how Kairos has helped him. But yeah, just in summary, I mean, he is a bridge for people finding peace there. And you know, whether you're Christian or Muslim or Jewish or whatever, um, he doesn't focus on that. He's a bridge to giving people peace and with whatever their religion they're coming in with. And if the administration doesn't want that, you know, that's a shame, you know, and I think they do. I think that's why Kairos is allowed in there, is that it really brings down the level of animosity for the whole prison. And Lance is wonderful at that. There's one other guys, maybe some of you remember, Leonard Taylor went by Raheem as well. And he did that same thing Leonard did with the Muslim and Christian community. So uh, he brought together those two groups, which can have a fair amount of stress in the prison. But Lance is much like Raheem in terms of just bringing everybody together. I would argue the corrections officers that know him all love him as much as we do, and so he's really special in that regard.
Thank you, Jeff. I think what we'll do now is we'll shift. I'll have, if Bradford's ready to play the song that he wrote about his meeting with Lance. And then when we return from the song, we will talk about what can happen next, what's going on. Jeff's group is Jeff from Columbia, they're planning some events. There's going to be a post-ride campaign that Gigi can speak about, postcard writing that Gigi can speak about. And as we shift to Bradford, Father Mark, yes, I agree. Where's one's humanity? Yeah, it's secondary to justice and rehabilitation. And that's been my experience with the system my entire life, is the humanity comes second to justice and rehabilitation, unfortunately. Bradford, are you ready? You are muted.
This song is called Stories. So I heard about Jesus on the radio, and I was humming along like it was a song that I've always known. And I can never get past my circumstance. I'm a recidivist
with a desperate wish for one last chance. If I could hear you breathing just this once. If I could hear you breathing just this once. So tell me your story and I'll tell you mine. We'll sing them like a song about how love just wasn't right. I've been waiting on my heart, like it's hard to find. I'm so tired of giving up one breath at a time. I know it's hard for someone to change, but the promise we made is like a crowded parade I just can't escape. And I've never known what it meant. I've got nothing to give, just this moment to live, but maybe that's well spent. But if I could hear you breathe just this once, if I could hear you breathing just this once. So tell me your story and I'll tell you mine. We'll sing them like a song about how love just wasn't right. I've been waiting on my heart, like it's hard to find. I'm so tired of giving up one breath at a time. I swear I won't stop now. I'll push on through and I don't know how. I'll bury the old me in the ground. I'm never giving up. I won't quit now. I'm not had enough. I'll drink it down, this bitter cup. So tell me your story, and I'll tell you mine. We'll sing them like a song about how love just wasn't right. I've been waiting on my heart, like it's hard to find. I'm so tired of giving up one breath at a time.
Thank you, Bradford. Thank you very much for that beautiful song. I want to thank all of the panelists as we move into action real quick while I still have people's attention. I want to thank Death Penalty Action for Abe being open and willing to help with all this and letting us use Ally, as well as your work. You're the reason we can restream this and stream this live. You have shared your resources with MADP to highlight Lance's case, and I just want to say I really appreciate it. Anyone who can donate, you can go to MADP and donate. You can also go to Death Penalty Action and donate to their organization as well. Abe did not know I was going to do that, so hopefully he does not ban me from future events for throwing that in there. But now let's go to action. And that's where I want to bring in Gigi and Jeff and maybe Abe to talk about what are things, Jeff Stack, what can be done? What are we doing? What can we do? And where it falls on our governor, who is Catholic, for those who don't know. And I say that because we are hoping that the Catholic pressure, and I will say this, I've been telling people that I believe the governor answers to his Lord more than he answers to his political status. And I hope I'm right in that. Part of me believes that way because he picked Catherine Hanaway to replace Attorney General Bailey, and he could have gone another route. He could have gone someone less middle of the ground than Catherine Hanaway, although she's pro-death penalty. And so I just continue to think there is room for movement with his Catholicism. But Gigi, Jeff Stack, and Abe, what can we do? What should we be doing? How can we, aside from signing the petition, chime in and give us some ideas? Tell us what's going on in mid-Missouri, Jeff Stack.
Well, we're gonna, Heidi, we'll be having, this is pretty far along the road here, but on the 13th of October, we'll be having a walk from Columbia to Jefferson City to appeal to the governor. That's a long ways down the road. Of course, we need to do much more. We'll have a public event also on probably the 13th, that Monday night first in the morning in front of the Boone County Courthouse, where sadly many people have been sentenced to death in our state and in the county. And then we'll have a program on the 13th as well. We're going to have a public program as well in Columbia, likely on the 7th anyway, 7th of October. But you mentioned about the petition. Of course, I think it's worth trying to begin to try to reach out to the governor, to try, through congregations, and to try to make that appeal, to try to show that there's a lot of public concern and support for allowing DNA evidence to be tested. I mean, the governor can do a lot of things in his position. He could put it on hold while there's a board of inquiry to look at some of these issues. So he has a wide breadth of possibilities. If the courts aren't going to intervene, I mean, he could appoint indeed some retired judges to look at this case. So, but he needs to begin to know that Missourians are greatly concerned about this injustice, and want to make sure, a lot of the people in the state may support the death penalty, but nobody supports a death sentence and being imposed against someone who is quite likely innocent or wrongly convicted.
Jeff. Gigi, do you want to talk some about where you all are headed on the campaign? And
Yeah, thanks. I would love that. I think playing off what Jeff just said, Missourians especially, raise your voice. You are the people of Missouri. Your governor needs to know where you stand. Our Take Action page right now has our petition on it. We are also doing, Heidi mentioned earlier, a postcard writing campaign. Now for the postcards, they're actually physical cards that are being doled out through separate organizations. Heidi, I know I just talked to Sophie. She'll get a couple of hundred to you. In the meantime, I would look for, there'll be another batch of website updates coming this week. So there will be the ability to go send a letter, see the governor's address, send a letter that way. Sending it electronically is fine. If you want to handwrite the letter, we strongly encourage actually physically sending a letter to the governor's office. The impact of him getting, and we've already given out well over 1,000 postcards for people to send in. The impact of him getting actual physical mail, it just hits differently than seeing that inbox fill up. So whatever you can do, if you can do a physical letter, that'll be great. That information will be on the website. I would say the biggest thing to do is to go sign up for our newsletter, because we're going to be launching some media events that are coming up that I'm not prepared to announce the dates, but that'll be in the newsletter, as well as a social media campaign, because again, the governor needs to hear from legislators, he needs to hear from the public, and he needs to hear from faith leaders. And we're rallying all of those parties to come together to speak up for Lance. So when the social media campaign kicks off, it'll be announced in the newsletter, it'll be on the website, it'll be on Instagram and TikTok. When the letter writing campaign goes live, it'll go live on the website, and our newsletter folks are just finding out about it directly. We have a Facebook page. We are going to be launching a TikTok and an Instagram, so as well as a YouTube channel. So I would just say wherever you're most comfortable engaging in terms of online, and however you can engage with the governor, we're also going to put some phone lines up there for folks to make phone calls. I want the governor to know Lance Shockley's name and to know, the concern that people have for this case.
Thank you, Gigi. And MADP will send out a mailing in the next week with calls to action regarding the governor, address, those type of things, how to, and encouraging people to write physically, as Gigi said. Emails work, but the physical contact, the people answering the phones. And I would like to, any faith groups, any organizations, religious orders of any manner, I believe that the governor is a man of faith, and with Lance being such a man of faith, that it would have to impact a governor to have someone say, you had 3 fathers call today, you had 2 sisters, and the next day you had 1 father today call 2 sisters. I would think that would have to impact a man of such faith that I have been told that Kehoe has. So anyone that has the ability to get through to religious communities in that manner, Heidi Moore is asking you to try to do that and push that to occur. Amnesty International is Amnesty USA is starting to get involved. Abe just posted their link to their announcement that came out last week to draw some attention to Lance's case. And with that, on the day of, hopefully it doesn't go this far, but October 7th, the Tuesday, the week before, we will be in Jefferson City, Missouri from noon to 1 p.m. We'll do the petition drop and the quiet vigil after the press conference is held. We are still trying to get people lined up for the press conference. And so anyway, that's the one thing that Missouri always does the week before. The October 14th, then, if we do not have any action by the governor at that point, Jeff's group is planning on ending their walk at the Capitol, where they stand in vigil with Missouri Catholic Conference and other groups, MADP. They stand in vigil at that. Go ahead, Abe.
Thanks, Heidi. Yes, there's going to be a schedule. And yes, we have about a month here. And one of the challenges that we have is that there's now 5 executions scheduled that week in different states. So I know most of the people here are probably from Missouri. I see one person, at least in the audience, who's from Florida, but we're, the challenge, one of the challenges, of course, is that there's a execution the same evening in Florida, but on the 16th is the execution scheduled of Robert Robertson in Texas, and that seems to be sucking up all the energy of certain organizations in the movement. That's all they're focused on, is that one execution, and that's what it's going to take, that much more for us all to gather the attention of allies and of organizations that have the capacity to bring to bear their lists in Missouri. So one of the things that part of the action is going to be doing is we organized a coalition of nearly 500 organizations around the federal clemency campaign and the federal legislation. So we're going to be reaching out to them to make sure that any organization that has capacity to bring to bear its membership on what's happening in Missouri, as well as the other states, but Missouri especially, because there's 2 people with real strong innocence claims being scheduled to be killed that week. And now's the time. Now's the time for getting organizations on board. Now's the time for each of us really to think about, who do we know that can bring to bear whatever their resources are, whether that's funds, which need to go to MADP, whether that is just the ability to get people on your list to do something, and that includes picking up the phone and writing a postal mail, handwritten note to the governor, and doing so following the direction of the campaign. Here's the language to use, here's the message. But we need those messages, and those, some organizations, God bless them, they take weeks to get something on their social media calendar, and we don't have that kind of time. So there's that. I also I know that they're stuck in a closet somewhere in Kansas City, and also a few of them are in the St. Louis area, but we've got a few years ago, we created a bunch of signs like this that are co-branded to MADP and death penalty action. And so these exist in Missouri. And if we had the funds, we would print more and, put these yard signs in your yard and, on busy street corners throughout the state. And if I had the money, I would just print up billboards and signs like that and get them all over the place, because that's the biggest challenge. With all of the chaos that is happening in the world right now and in this country right now, getting people to pay attention to one execution a month from now is the biggest challenge that we have. But the more people that can understand that this is happening, the better we will be at it. So that means calling any kind of talk radio shows, any kind of, especially like the morning drive shows on the local radio stations, if they're locally produced, call them and say, hey, do you know about this? Can we talk about this? Can you point people to this webpage? Anything that will get people thinking about this and knowing about it, because we have to make Lance Shockley's name the most famous name in Missouri, not the day he's being killed, but immediately. So whatever you can do. And if you have ideas, send them to Heidi, send them to Gigi. And we're happy to do whatever we can in support of this effort. So, and I just will note that we're doing that at the same time as we're talking about now 13 executions are scheduled between now and the end of the year. We're already well beyond the record for the number of executions in over a decade. If all 13 of these executions go through, God forbid, we're going to equal the number of executions as far back as 2012. And we may even exceed that, because other states, Florida is just setting a new execution date every 2 weeks. So, we'll see where all that goes. Hopefully this one will be stopped. Robert Robertson will be stopped. Anthony Boyd in Alabama has an innocence claim. Hopefully that'll be stopped. Anyway, I could go on and on. Bottom line is, what can you do? Who do you know that you can talk to encourage groups with capacity to do action, and people with capacity to support this work financially as well as with action? Because the more we have now, the more we can do ahead of the time that this execution is happening.
Thank you, Abe. Thank you very much. Gigi?
I just wanted to share really quickly two things, some questions that we've gotten in the past. When you do sign our petition, you are and will remain anonymous in terms of it not being shared with the public. The petition is shared with the governor and the governor alone. Nobody can see that you've signed if there is a concern with anonymity. And there also is a page that we don't talk about enough. There is a submit a tip page. Those tips go to the legal team. If you know something about this case, or you know someone who knows something about this case and all these years later has been reluctant to share, your identity will be protected and you can submit a tip through the website straight to the legal team. I am a firm believer, as Abe said, it's about what you can do and then who you know and how they can take action. And please, if you know somebody who knows something, please encourage them to send that in. Thanks, Heidi.
Thanks,
I appreciate
Gigi.
it.
Yeah, thanks, Gigi. That's a good point. And anyone who has signed our petition where it says submit a tip, it links to the page Gigi's referencing. We are not soliciting our own tips. We are not qualified to do that. It links to the legal team's page. That's what we believed was also probably in the best interest for this case and for Lance. As we go to wrap up, I want to thank each of the panelists for their time, for Jeff and Bradford speaking so personally about their personal connections with Lance. And if anyone has any questions, I think we addressed anything that popped up. I thank Jeff Stack again, Abe and Allie for their assistance, as well as Gigi, always, and then Jeff and Bradford. Jeff, my thoughts will be with you as we go through the next 30 days, knowing that he is a personal friend of yours, and I am very sorry. Hopefully we can get the good news is Kehoe has not made a decision to execute someone before. He is not Parsons. That is the silver lining right now. And let's hope that he understands his Catholic teachings and just leans into it. Thank you all for being with us, and thank you for everything you can do. info@madpmo.org is the quickest way to get a hold of me, the easiest way for me to explain on this type of format. And I can get a hold of any of the panelists if you have further questions. Jeff Stack, thanks for all you're doing in Mid-Missouri to draw attention, and Abe for the movement in general across the country. Thank you all very much. Have a blessed evening. Thanks for joining us.